I know that it's at the end of your day. It's the beginning of mine, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the beautiful schools that we're building at Wildflower through telling a little bit of stories of where I'm at right now. But maybe you want to just take a minute. At Wildflower, we usually start with a meditation of some kind and close your eyes for a moment. I know I'm starting my day, but this is a long ending of yours. And maybe you even want to close your eyes for a moment and take a breath. I know going from back-to-back sessions, the virtual Zoom calls, and take a moment to remember the physical body that is holding your precious soul right now, that has been so open to learning and engagement all day. And without that body, we wouldn't be here. Maybe just take a moment and think about what healing means to you, what early childhood education means to you, elementary education, our youngest children, and hold a connection maybe with a child. And you can open your eyes. There's going to be very little visuals, just a couple quotes on the screen, or you can keep your eyes closed and just listen a little bit to this letter I've written for you instead of designing another Zoom session that we just raced through. So, dearest Teach for India community, I've tried to write this session now a number of times. I've spent a week in deep reflection after months now in deep reflection as we entered 2020. I've stared at blank pages, blank Google slides, blank emails, and talked in circles with a number of my trusted friends and family about what I might humbly offer in 10 minutes with you all. I've been nervous and told myself many times, Rebecca, you're not supposed to agree to do anything else. You need to be there with your kids and the schools and this. I've been saying there's no more room on my plate, but there's so much I want to savor, and I always want to make a little more room. Besides, Shaheen emailed me, and I can't really say no, so here I am. I just want you to know what an honor it is, and to be trusted with this time as I lean into my own discomfort and growth to share with you today. After all, the invitation was to share reflections in the form of a 10-minute session on early childhood and elementary education. The reality is I've spent 6 months now in deep reflection, filling journals, making meaning of the endless wisdom shared with me over the past decade, both from my personal experience, but mostly listening to the experiences of others serving justice in their community through education. And now I had 2 little boys next to me in everything I did. But now the time has come to design this session, and I find myself wanting to share more intimately than I can make work with a PowerPoint. So here I am, just sharing a letter from my journal, capturing this moment in time when the invitation was shared, and extending the same to you. That we storytell vulnerably with painful truths and celebrations of the sacred, even in the moments when we are here to be sharing, quote unquote, professionally. My own journey in education, of course, starts with my own experiences as a student. And I think often about how school became such a safe place for me, and as I'm understanding just how chaotic some of my upbringing was. And yet I was truly lucky to have had the journey I had in education, mostly in small public schools. After many years teaching, coaching, and designing with Teach for America, having incredible experiences like these, I became curious about models of school that had the ability to really capitalize on the leadership of a teacher, that could radically trust teachers, communities, and children. Intimate schools where children could really be free to be the people that they were destined to be inside and could see that modeled in adults every day. I wanted to do more of the big dreaming for intimate learning spaces that could be truly liberatory. I was a product of very small learning programs myself, and in my time thinking and reflecting on these really simple questions that seem to always be behind me, and yet we're too busy to think about professionally in the world of education or personally as parents. It takes such intentionality, or maybe some mandated quarantines, sleepless nights with sick babies, forced reflection time to get back to these questions and get back to these questions. And I've been asking them since I think I was in the classroom, but continue to find new answers on how we might approach the sacredness of raising children to create a more beautiful world than we live in today. I can't help but ask myself in this moment, what is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of schooling? The purpose of schooling now, because we've just seen it, all of the inequities exacerbated. They were all already in some ways here. And yet, now, how is the role of the educator now changed? And if so, if there's really required healing, what do we need to do collectively to support that new essential role that educators will play in healing our more just world? I'm aware that using the word healing implies that we are in a place of deep brokenness. I know that my world feels deeply broken. It's been so challenging to think about how to talk to any group of people. While we all share very similar human experiences, our day-to-day lives are so different dramatically. And yet, as our world is more connected now via technology, I know we're all feeling the impact of the emotional distance needed for social distancing. It's wild to even watch a movie now and see a crowded restaurant. I feel panicked looking at a packed airplane and realizing that I'm holding my breath. And then I think about my children who are sitting next to me thinking the exact same things, who sat next to me as we figured out a plan to shut down their schools because my children are also my students at my schools. And they sat beside me as we figured those things out. And over the past months, I've reread a number of books. I decided it was important that while in quarantine with them, I wanted to read and journal and participate in their work cycle without being in front of a screen together. I loved revisiting old books and stories and lessons and journals and photos. I found much of my trip to when I first visited Teach for India. But when I think about brokenness and healing, I'm reminded of this quote, which I found only because I was reading alongside my boys. We are bodies of broken bones. I guess I'd always known, but never fully considered that being broken is what makes us human. We all have our reasons. Sometimes we're fractured by the choices we make. Sometimes we're shattered by things we would never have chosen. But our brokenness is also the source of our common humanity, the basis for our shared search for comfort, meaning, and healing. Our shared vulnerability and imperfection nurtures and sustains our capacity for compassion. We have a choice. We can embrace our humanness, which means embracing our broken natures and the compassion that remains our best hope for healing. Or we can destroy our brokenness, forsworn compassion, and as a result, deny our own humanity. I thought of the guards strapping Jimmy Dill to the gurney of that very hour. I thought of the people who would cheer his death and see it as some kind of victory. I realized they were broken people too, if they would never admit it. So many of us have become afraid and angry. We've become so fearful and vengeful that we've thrown away children, discarded the disabled, and sanctioned the imprisonment of sick and the weak, not because they are a threat to public safety or beyond rehabilitation, but because we think it makes us seem tough, less broken. I thought of the victims of violent crimes and the survivors of murdered loved ones and how we've pressured them to recycle their pain and anguish and give it back to the offenders we prosecute. I thought of the many ways we've legalized vengeful and cruel punishments and how we've allowed our victimization to justify the victimization of others. We've submitted to the harsh instinct to crush those among us whose brokenness is most visible. But simply punishing the broken, walking away from them, or hiding them from sight only ensures they remain broken, and we do too. There is no wholeness outside of our reciprocal humanity. And if you haven't read Just Mercy, this is a plug for sure. From March till the end of June, I took quarantine exceptionally seriously. For me, the biggest fear I began having wasn't just the lives for me and my family members, as we lost many, but it's this notion that we could be unconsciously become carriers and perpetrators of someone else's illness. The notion that we can do harm just by breathing and being close to each other. I have to say it was overwhelming to sit and talk about it with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old and make our home into that safe space that school felt like in a day-to-day and could feel like home. And think about the children all over the world that didn't have half of what my children had. And yet here we were. As soon as our schools began to close, we closed the door of our little home in the mountains for 4 months. Me, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and only now are very cautiously engaged with a few friends and family members. But it was also a magically immersive month that had me with my pen in hand, with my pen in hand constantly. And I went back and kept thinking about this one quote. And this is actually the message I wanted to come and bring to share today. At Wildflower, which I'll talk about in a moment, but here's the introduction. At Wildflower, the value we hold most dearly is that everything and everyone is connected. And I think it's important to remember that values are not abstractions. In the same way that it's impossible to become a good soccer player by thinking about soccer, we can only live our values by constant practice. So we'll practice this value in all the little things. We will not meet our children's misbehavior with punishment. We will lead our children not by coercion, but by tapping into their natural inclinations to be peaceful, curious, and good. And we will do the same for the adults, not creating a hierarchy within the school staff, but rather creating an environment where teachers operate as peers and co-leaders. We will seek to serve and support all of the community, including, and importantly, those most underserved by the traditional social system. There will be times that is difficult. That is difficult to do those things. And we will welcome these times as a way to practice our values. Because if our children see us striving to help one another and others day in and day out over the next 3 years, they'll understand in a deep way that everything is connected, and they will develop the compassion and courage that arises with that understanding. And for me, that's much more important than learning long division, although we'll teach them that too. And I've got only a few minutes left, so I'll just leave you all with the question, which is, what are the values that we want to live and model, and how is our leadership with children? How's that going to be our way to choose to heal the world?